Hello, hello. Welcome everyone. Super excited for y'all to be joining me today. Thank you so much for taking the time. Excited to be talking about holistic website optimization and SEO. I know we'll kick off in just a minute, but I do want to give those who might be straggling by a few minutes a chance to get in and get settled. So I'll go ahead and kind of introduce Nexus, do a couple of housekeeping items. So I am Jenny Russ. I am a client solutions manager at Nexus Marketing. We are a digital marketing agency based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And we specialize in inbound lead generation and search engine optimization for businesses selling into mission-driven industries. So we typically work with software or service providers who are then selling to nonprofits, healthcare organizations, schools, higher ed institutions, associations, organizations like that. Super excited to have you all here today. Just a couple of housekeeping items. I will take questions at the end. So if you've got any, feel free to leave them either in the chat or in kind of the questions feature at the bottom. I think it should be at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. We also do have another Nexus team member in the chat. You can find them under Nexus Marketing. If you're running into any technical difficulties or things like that, please feel free to let them know. They can hopefully help you solve those. And then, of course, at any time, if you've got thoughts or opinions you'd like to share, please feel free to leave that in the chat as well. All right, it's been about 2 minutes. I think probably we are good to go ahead and get started, and those who can't join us live will receive the recording. So before we dive into the content, I would love to quickly put out a poll, and I'm going to do that now, and get a sense from the group right now, kind of how focused is your role on SEO kind of at the current moment? Would love to just get a sense of kind of the group that we have. If y'all are really focused on SEO, if it's something that, is part of the work that you're doing, maybe entirely the work that you're doing. I'm seeing a lot of people right now, kind of a small part of the work that they're doing. I think for most people, SEO is not necessarily like their entire role. So excited to be sharing more with y'all today. If you've got any questions at any point, obviously, please let me know, but should be a good group. All right, let's go ahead and get things started. So what is website optimization? When we're talking about that, like what are we talking about? So overall, website optimization is the process of performing or improving your website's performance across a bunch of different areas. So speed, usability, conversion rates, search engine performance, of course, content quality, and with the goal being to increase traffic, engagement, conversions, and revenue. When I think of those 4 metrics, where our agency really focuses is wanting to think through conversions and revenue. Our primary focus is on lead gen. And so while increased traffic and engagement is great and is typically a sign that you will see increased conversions and increased revenue from that organic channel, those are what we would consider like, this might be too harsh of a term, but almost a vanity metric. They're great to have. We love to see them. They do typically indicate that we're on the right path. But when we're thinking about like what really makes a good, high quality SEO strategy, if we're thinking about like what does that look like from a results perspective, we really want to be thinking about, are people landing on your website and converting in whatever way you want them to? And is that translating into revenue for the business? If that is kind of appropriate for the business. Obviously, some organizations that might look a little different. I also just want to highlight that we really think of this as a continuous process. So all of these things that I talk about today, I'd really highly recommend, thinking through how these can become part of your regular ongoing process instead of thinking of these as kind of one and done projects. Things are changing all the time. Google changes its algorithms, the internet changes, AI is certainly starting to play an impact. So it's important that these are things that you're kind of continuously iterating on and thinking about. So I'm going to be focusing on kind of 4 different areas today on-page SEO and content optimization, technical SEO, website performance optimization, and conversion rate optimization. So for on-page SEO and content optimization, they are very intertwined. We think of them as kind of one category, but they are slightly different. So content optimization is really the process of like planning, creating, putting out good, high quality content that's SEO friendly, that's going to educate your users, that's going to answer the questions they have, that's going to meet that search intent. And of course, conveying your brand's expertise, maintaining message, like sharing more about the brand, all of those good things. On-page SEO is all the things that, when I think about it, it's like all the things that are physically on the page, but that aren't the actual content itself. So think your headings, the images, the alt text, like all of those other things, those elements that are present on your page, but are not the physical copy that you have necessarily written, is on-page SEO. And also, again, kind of that, those have a big impact on search engine performance. So before we dive in to some best practices, I'd be curious to know, and again, I'm going to put out a quick poll to see kind of what the vibe of the group is. But I'd be curious to know right now how successful you feel like your content strategy is. We talk to a lot of people, I am in a more outward facing role. So we talk to a lot of people outside of our organization where I would say kind of the most common answers are things aren't going great. Maybe they're not going terribly, but they're not going great. And then, for a lot of people, they may not be measuring their performance at all. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of like, okay, it can be better. I'm seeing some not currently measuring performance. I'm not actually seeing anyone who's saying that they like don't feel like their strategy is successful at all, which is awesome. Super interesting to see. Thank you guys for participating in that. All right, so best practices for content optimization. I'm going to talk about a few: keyword research, audience research, quality content, optimizing additional on-site elements, and regular content audits. So keyword research is probably the thing. I mean, honestly, I could probably talk for the next 23 minutes about keyword research alone. So I will try to keep things relatively brief, but I do think that this is really the foundation. If you're thinking about how you want to build out your content strategy, this is really the foundation. It's the best way to identify which topics are going to be most valuable, which ones are going to be, which ones are going to resonate the most with your audience, which ones are going to drive the most value from a SERP perspective. And so there are a couple of things that we would recommend thinking about when you're doing your keyword research. The first here is prioritizing bottom of the funnel terms for lead generation. Again, for us as an agency, we always want to focus on how can your organic search performance be driving leads and to be driving qualified traffic. Traffic from people who aren't good prospects for you is fine. It's certainly not a bad thing, but ideally we want to be getting in front of people who are going to engage our services, who's going to buy our product, who's going to sign up for a newsletter, whatever that conversion, ultimate conversion you want them to perform is going to be. So on the bottom left here, I've got a quick example of that. So looking at, this is an example, like if we were thinking about, say, Nexus's SEO ourselves, digital marketing, we would think, well, that's a keyword that's relevant for us, but it's so top of funnel. And you can see you've got like hundreds of thousands of people searching that in a given month. The problem with that, of course, is that you could have, so many reasons someone might be searching digital marketing. They could be a college student studying digital marketing. They could be, I don't know, some random person who doesn't know what digital marketing is. Like there are a million possible reasons that someone might search digital marketing. What are the odds that they might be a good fit for, say, our services? Then you've got B2B SEO. I would consider that more middle of the funnel. It is certainly much more kind of focused in on what we do. Our agency does B2B SEO. That is a super relevant keyword there. But if you look like B2B SEO agencies, those are going to be the people, if they're actively looking for agencies, they are much more likely to actually want to engage our services. And so again, when you're starting out with an SEO strategy where we always recommend is thinking through what are those most bottom of the funnel terms. Maybe that is a software term if you are a software company. Maybe again, that's a fundraising consultant, fundraising firm, like whatever that kind of term is, that's going to suggest that someone is looking for a product or services. That's where we're going to recommend starting. You're going to see that there are fewer people searching for those terms typically, but those people that are searching them are going to be much more likely to convert into a real lead for you than, the 200,000 people potentially searching digital marketing. So something to consider there. Another thing to consider when you're looking at keyword research in terms of like determining what kind of content you want to put out is keyword research can be really valuable for understanding what language your industry or your audience is using. So in the top right here, I've got an example from the healthcare space, EMR software, and some variations as well. So as you can see, the term EMR software gets wildly more searches in a month than, spelling out electronic medical record software or using EMR platform or EMR solution. When you're writing a piece of content, you may not necessarily think, well, using, putting out a piece on EMR software versus EMR platforms, like those don't feel, the piece itself might be super similar. But that language is being used, very differently in terms of like how many people are searching. So keyword research can be really valuable when you're planning your content in terms of understanding what language you should be incorporating, and what variations of those keywords are going to be the most valuable. And then as well, just determining what topics, when we're thinking about, you've got your bottom of the funnel pages, you're starting to think like, what other topics can I talk about maybe that are more middle or top of funnel? And you're maybe debating between a couple of different topics that are similar, might put you in front of the same audience, but maybe you're just having difficulty prioritizing. Search volume can be a really useful way to understand kind of what are people looking for, what's going to drive the most value for you. So this example here on the bottom right, we've got nonprofit accounting, nonprofit bookkeeping, and nonprofit budgeting. All pretty top of funnel terms, all relatively related, but not quite the same, different topics, but certainly within kind of a similar area, and would likely put you in front of a similar audience, right? Maybe someone who's working for a nonprofit in some sort of financial capacity. But again, as you can see, nonprofit accounting has a much larger search volume than nonprofit bookkeeping, which in turn has a much larger volume than nonprofit budgeting. So maybe the answer is, ideally, I'd love to write all three of these pieces. I know I'm not going to have the bandwidth or the time to write all three of them right now. Which one can I prioritize? And so again, a lot of this keyword research is really helpful in a couple of different ways, both, what topics should you be talking about? How should you prioritize them? All of those good things. So a bunch of different things to consider there. I love talking about keyword research. I think it's fascinating. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. But again, I think this is really the foundation of a strong content strategy is understanding kind of what the keyword landscape looks like. All right. Moving right along to audience research. So this goes right in hand with keyword research. I think they're super, super similar, but understanding your specific audience's needs, their pain points, their challenges, their goals, all of that stuff is really important, especially when thinking about what are you actually going to put in your content or who are you writing for? So understanding what are the different personas for your different buyers? What information might they need to make an effective decision, to be convinced to sign up for a demo, whatever that conversion is. Understanding, are they in a real buying mindset? Are they more in a fact-finding mindset? And understanding kind of where those are, and then tailoring your content pieces for different parts of your audience, really valuable there. And again, I think kind of goes right hand in hand with keyword research. I think keyword research is a really great way to get some insights into maybe the larger market outside of, outside of your own kind of customer base and your own network. Next is quality content. I mean, this one is super straightforward. You should put out high quality content in a smaller volume rather than crap in a larger volume. I mean, obviously, kind of in a perfect scenario, you're able to put out a lot of really high quality content. In reality, I think most people, I'd maybe be curious to hear in the chat if this is the case. I think most people do not have time, or their team does not have time to be, developing large volumes of high quality content. That's one of the biggest challenges I hear from people, is that they just don't have time. And I think especially with the rise of AI generated content, it's easier than ever to spit out a bunch of, I mean, not to be rude, but like kind of crap. And so I think, it's what we've seen is that there is an increased demand in the rise of AI content for, high quality content that's written by humans, for humans, with experience, that can actually like answer your questions. You're seeing way more people go to platforms like Reddit, looking at reviews, things like that. Like, people really want to hear from other humans. So again, having that high quality content is really important. And I think when building out your content strategy, thinking through, okay, if I can't put out 100 pieces in 3 months, which would be crazy, what are the 10 pieces I could put out? Okay, if I can't put out 10 pieces, what are the 5 most important pieces that I can make sure that they're really high quality? So all very important there. Next up is optimizing additional on-site elements. So those were some of those things that I mentioned before that are on the page, but are not necessarily like the actual like written content itself. So you've got the URL structure, you've got the headings, you've got visual elements. So like your images, then plus the alt text, maybe you've got video, external links, all of that good stuff. All really important, all really good things to think about. I think for a lot of people, they focus so much on the written copy, which obviously is very important, and they forget about some of these things. But these things have a really big impact on SEO performance, and it's certainly something that you shouldn't overlook. And finally, here we've got regular content audits. Content audits are a great opportunity to take kind of an overarching view of your content's performance and look at what is actually driving the results that you want to see. What is performing well, both in the eyes of Google, but also in the eyes of your audience. So looking at, what's ranking really well, what is Google serving up a lot, but also which pages are converting the most. Are there certain pages that are maybe really, really top of funnel, where people maybe they just want, they want a definition of some term. They pop onto your page, they see that, they pop right off. That's probably not exactly what you're going for with your content. And maybe there's a lesson to be learned there and an adjustment to be made to your content strategy around, okay, we don't need to be putting more effort into these like really, really kind of highest, most top of funnel pages because they're just not driving what we want to see. Versus, right, maybe you've got other content where you're like, man, I had no idea that this type of page or this topic was so popular. People want to learn more. They're signing up for the newsletter, all these things. And maybe that's, right, a signal that is something that you should be talking about more, content that you should be producing more of. So it's a really great way to just like get a sense of what's working well, what's not working well, and to use that to shape your strategy. We recommend running a content audit, at least once a year. I would say probably more around like every 6 months is probably more best practice. Obviously they can take some time, but looking at, again, both kind of SEO metrics to understand how Google is understanding and ranking your content, but also some of those deeper metrics around conversions is really valuable. All right, moving right along to technical SEO, which is basically anything on the back end of the website that's going to make it easier for search engines to discover, crawl, index, render pages on your website. On-page SEO and content optimization is all like front end stuff that people are seeing on the website. Technical SEO is all about the stuff that people are not seeing, all of that good back end business. So a couple best practices we're going to talk about: XML sitemaps and site structure, maximizing crawl budget, optimizing structured data, and implementing regular monitoring. So for this one, your XML sitemap, for those who may not know, it's basically like almost a cheat sheet for Google that gives almost a roadmap of the content on your website. It helps it understand kind of what content is there on your website. So keeping that up to date, clean, organized is really important. If you have one, I would recommend creating one if you don't. And then of course with your site structure, making sure that you've got a really logical site structure that uses topic clusters, pillar pages, subfolders, like everything's organized appropriately. It's going to make your website and your content a lot easier to navigate for search engine bots. Next up is maximizing your crawl budget. So making sure that you're addressing issues like duplicate content, poor internal linking, slow loading pages, anything that is making it more difficult for a crawler to move through your content quickly and effectively is going to be an issue. So again, I would really highlight that like logical internal linking structure makes it really easy to navigate between content. I also, for reference, a couple weeks ago, we hosted an entire webinar on technical SEO. So if there's any of this that I mentioned that you'd like more in-depth information about, please let me know. I can either share the recording or, always hop on a call if you've got, more in-depth questions about some technical SEO stuff. Next one here is optimizing structured data. So structured data is like additional data that you can add into the back end of your website that helps Google understand like what your content is. So you can mark, certain pieces of content as like reviews or videos or things like that. And so it helps your content be featured in like SERP features. So, when people's like business review pages come up with their contact information, their location, all of those things. Better indexing helps Google, again, kind of understand your information on your website. This is also incredibly important for AI crawlers. So if you think about like how your website is being referenced on like ChatGPT and some of those other AI platforms, structured data is really valuable for that as well. Last one here, I would say like similar story to content audits. I would really try and figure out some sort of way to implement regular monitoring for your technical SEO. Search engines are crawling the internet all the time, so you always want to be monitoring these. Unaddressed technical SEO issues can have a really big impact on SEO rankings. So we recommend performing a technical audit at least every quarter. I would say that for organizations where you've got maybe a larger volume of people who are making changes on the website, whether that's, you've got a larger team, whether that's, you've got marketing in there plus product, plus maybe the development team, like whatever that looks like, kind of the more people you've got making changes, the more likely it is that a mistake might get made. So there are a bunch of tools that you can use for 24/7 monitoring that will alert you as like in the moment in real time as problems come up. I wouldn't necessarily say that is needed for most organizations, but again, if you're working with a large team or have a lot of people who are making changes into the back end, it might be something you want to think about. Next up is website performance optimization, which is pretty much just talking about increasing your site's speed. Making sure that pages load quickly, that it's user-friendly. Page speed is a direct ranking factor. And so faster loading sites, they are more likely to rank higher in search engine result pages. So it's really important. And then also from that conversion perspective, I think we've all probably been as a consumer in a position where, you go to buy something, it's not loading and, you run out of time, you get distracted, you close out, you get frustrated, whatever it is. So again, making sure both from that SEO perspective, but also from the conversion perspective. Oh, there we go. So for best practices, we'll talk through a couple here. First one is focusing on the most important metrics. So the three most important metrics from the kind of core web vitals from Google are largest contentful paint, interaction to next paint, and cumulative layout shift. for these, I'll just kind of do a quick run through of what each of these are. Largest contentful paint is basically how long it takes for the largest element that is above the fold. So basically like what shows up before you do any scrolling to appear. Interaction to next paint is how long it takes for you to interact. So like click on something, click on a drop down, whatever that is, how long it takes for the website to start processing that event and respond to whatever you've done. And then cumulative layout shift is basically how many, it'll measure how many like unanticipated shifts in the web page happen during that loading process. Again, I think, easier to understand in a normal example. Like, I don't know if you've ever been, say, on like an e-commerce site and you're shopping and you see something you want and you go to click on it and the web page will like shift a little bit as you're going to click, and you'll end up accidentally clicking on something you didn't mean to. That is what this is. So kind of measuring how many of those happen at different speeds. All important things to think through. If you're not sure how your website is performing, you can put your website through kind of the Google Page Speed Insights. It's really easy to do, just Google Page Speed Insights, and you can put in your website and it'll tell you kind of how you're performing for all these things. And it'll also provide a bunch of recommendations on kind of things you can do to fix these. Next is reducing latency with a CDN. So a CDN is a content delivery network. And basically what it does is it helps distribute your content across multiple servers across the world so that when people in other areas are loading your content, it moves quicker because they are closer to a server. Last up is optimizing the code, just, for the back end of your website, making sure that your code is clean, concise, you're reducing file sizes where possible, you're removing unnecessary code, all of those good things. All right, I'm going to speed through a couple of these. I think this is this last one, but this is certainly still very important. So conversion rate optimization is increasing the percentage of conversions on a website. So, right, if you're doing all these things, you're getting more traffic, like that should lead to more conversions because, the more people who are on your website, the more people who should be converting. But this is thinking through, like, even if, how do we also take like going from 100 to 1,000 people is great, but how do we go from like 5% of 100 to 20% of 1,000 converting in the way that you want? So thinking through once people are on your site, making them more likely to convert. So a couple best practices we'll run through here. First is optimizing and rearranging your CTAs. So CTAs are calls to action. Making sure that these, and this is a great opportunity for you to play around with some of these, but like, where are they on the page? Are they throughout the page? Are they really highly visible? Are they very clear and using very obvious language? Are they specific to the audience that you are looking to do? Are they specific to your product? Whatever that looks like, making sure that those are as direct, as effective as possible. It's really important. This goes hand in hand. They could almost be the same thing, but like improving that micro copy. So when we think of micro copy, it's like that really short, the 3 or 4 word blurb that is on some of those calls to actions, like the download now, the add to cart, the book a demo, whatever that is. That is really crucial. And again, this is a great place where you can maybe do, some A/B testing, some experimentation on trying different types of CTAs, different types of micro copy, seeing what works the best. And last here is incorporating social proof. So, if you've got client quotes, client logos, reviews, awards, if you've received them, incorporating those onto your contact form around some of these CTAs, onto your main page, it's proven to really be very helpful for conversion rate optimization, can really improve the percentage of people who actually end up converting. So really valuable there. This again, kind of just a final note around like, this is not, all of these things are really important. They kind of generally touch some different teams, but this is something where you should be thinking about this regularly, going kind of actively monitoring here. I think that can be a challenge sometimes for organizations, but it's really something that I would really highly recommend trying to, incorporate into your regular process, because it's important and it evolves and things grow and change. All right, I know we are at the half-hour mark, so for those of you who need to get moving, it was great to have you. Thank you so much for coming and participating. I do see that we have a couple of questions, so I will stick around and answer some of these. Oh, so a great one here. How do you measure success? How long from the time you implement your SEO plan to the time you start seeing more inbound leads? I think that is a great question. So I think there are multiple different things you can look at to measure success. So I would say first, like increased impressions and growth in keyword rankings. That would be the first one. So if you've got a page or website that's ranking for nothing at all, you're probably not, you're going to put it out, you're going to start optimizing, it's going to start on page 7, and then it's going to move up to page 5, and then it's going to move up to page 2, then it's going to move up, up and up page 1, ideally, right? That's what we would want. And so impressions is like how much is it being served out to Google? Keywords, like how many keywords it's ranking for. Those are always going to be first, even before traffic, because right, if you're ranking on page 3, that's certainly better than not ranking at all or ranking on page 10, but you're probably not going to see any traffic from there. So that would be kind of that first indicator. Next, we would assume we would start to see some increased traffic. That's a great metric that we want to measure. What we would do is we would really look at like the back-end Google Analytics data and look and see kind of what are those actual conversions. That is going to look different for every business, whether or not, and maybe you've got multiple different conversions that you're looking at. So, signing up for a newsletter could be a conversion, booking a demo, signing up for a free consultation. So that's kind of how we would measure ultimate success in terms of like how many of those people are actually converting into leads. And then of course, also want to think about how qualified those leads are. In terms of timeline, the tough answer is it depends. The couple of factors that I would say it depends most on. One, of course, is like your investment level. So if you go like crazy gung-ho on SEO, you're going to start to see things move a little faster. It also depends on where you get started. So, ranking a page that has, or ranking a page on a website that has no authority, that is brand new, that maybe hasn't done any SEO in the past, that's likely going to take a little bit longer than say, trying to improve the performance of a page that maybe has been sitting around page 2 or 3 and bumping it up to 1. I would say, for most people, you're going to start to see a real increase in inbound leads around the like 9-month to 18-month mark, kind of depending on those factors. Ideally, it's within a year. But again, if it's not something that's your primary focus, it may take a little longer than that. A great question about incorporating keywords. Can you combine multiple keywords per piece, or is that ineffective? It is not ineffective, but what I would say is, thinking through what are like appropriate keyword clusters is important. So if we think of a keyword cluster, you've got like the primary keyword. So if we think back to that like EMR software example, that would be the primary keyword. And then you've got all of those other keywords that are related to it. Ideally, one page, Google's going to understand that those are all related, and one page is going to be able to rank for all of those keywords. What I would not recommend doing, for example, is trying to incorporate like 2 very different keyword clusters into the same piece, because I think that can be a little confusing. So, if you were a hospital and you were trying to rank for EMR software and you were trying to rank for like patient communication software, I'm coming up with that off the top of my head. Trying to write a piece that's like best EMR softwares and patient communication softwares is I think going to be much less effective than having one that is purely dedicated to EMR, one that is purely dedicated to patient communication, with the understanding that there are probably going to be little variations of those terms that you will absolutely be able to incorporate and rank for, but that those kind of big topic clusters are still kept separate there. All right, I hope that answered all of your questions. Anything else before I hop off? I know we went a few minutes over, so if there's anything else that you'd like to chat about, please, would love to hear from you guys. My email is Jenny, that's JENNY.Russ, RUSS, @nexusmarketing.com. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I really appreciate you attending and participating. Have a good one. Bye.